I'm going to talk about the integration between Counterpoint and Avalara. And so we use the Avalara product, I think that's called Avatax, to do our integration. So we use an API interface between Avalara and Counterpoint. So the API is how the information travels between Counterpoint and Avalara. And there are two pieces to it. We have the sales tax calculation piece and also a shipping address verification. So as we're entering a customer shipping address in Counterpoint, it's automatically checking with Avalara to confirm that we have the right, street address and it's got the right zip code, and we've all entered our address into a website for shipping and we see corrections come back and that kind of thing. So it's validating that we have the right shipping address so that the right sales tax is calculated. And then when that shipping address correction comes back, it will come into Counterpoint and it will update the shipping address in the Counterpoint sales transaction. And then of course there's a sales tax calculation. And as we heard earlier, it's a real-time tax calculation. So as soon as we start the transaction in Counterpoint, it starts sending information via the API to Avalara for the tax calculation. So it's sending information about the customer, where the store is located, whether or not we're shipping the item, what the item is, all these different things that are being communicated to Avalara throughout the transaction. So why use the interface? First of all, it enhances the customer experience, as we talked about earlier, and the sales staff experience and your management experience, because we're all confident that the right tax calculation is happening for the customer, the item, the location, and all the things that we've talked about. And it's instantaneous. So this is happening right now. We don't have to wait for the salesperson to try to figure out the right sales tax to charge and all of those different things that can take up time for the salesperson and for the customer. It's accurate because Avalara is taking care of all of the sales tax updates, and we don't have to take care of updating all of that in our Counterpoint system. Avalara then takes care of our sales tax reporting and also exemption reporting. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then if you want Avalara sales tax filing, they have an extra service where they will take care of your filing for you and all of your certificate, your exemption certificate management as well. So who will benefit from this? As they said, they have a service that they will talk to you and determine whether or not you will really benefit from this service. But generally, it's businesses that ship orders throughout the United States and Canada. Businesses that have location in several states and localities that want to be sure you're charging the correct tax to every location in every situation. Businesses that have items with various tax rules. So we talked about some of those earlier in the presentation, but like some states tax food, other states don't tax food, different items have different rates. So there's a lot of complexity to that, and we don't need to worry about that anymore. And then also, if you want to sort of move the burden of keeping up with your tax changes and calculations and all of that, and you want to move that burden to Avalara instead of keeping it in the business, you're a good candidate for this. Also, if you use an e-commerce solution, and even if you're bringing sales into Counterpoint for tracking, still the sales tax calculation for these e-commerce sales are usually done from the e-commerce site, and you get your reporting for sales tax from the e-commerce site rather than getting that reporting from Counterpoint, because generally they're keeping up with that side of it and we're keeping up with the sales that are coming out of Counterpoint. So if you're going to think about using the Avalara interface, there are a few assumptions that we make about usage. First of all, you need a reliable internet connection, because this is happening real time, instantaneously. Like I said, the tax is being calculated all throughout the transaction and updated throughout the transaction. All your sales are within US and Canada, because international sales are not supported. we sort of are saying, if we're going to use this integration, that all sales tax calculations will be calculated through the Avalara integration. We're kind of turning over that calculation all to Avalara. And then also because of that, Avalara is a system of record for all your sales tax and your tax reporting, because your tax reporting will come from Avalara more than likely. All items in Counterpoint will have the correct Avalara tax code entered into the tax category field of the item. And that's up to the customer to take care of that, you as the customer to take care of doing all of that on your items, and we can certainly help consult with you on that. And also the tax exempt customers are marked in Counterpoint with a tax code of exempt, and also that their tax ID number is in their customer record, because the tax ID number is what we send to Avalara. And then also just a note that the Avalara integration is not supported with order management or with offline ticket entry. So when we implement this, we install the Avalara integration and do some settings configuration on your Counterpoint server. And then part of the installation of this and the integration makes changes to some of the security codes in Counterpoint and the store settings, so that we're sure that we're sort of taking away the ability to do some things about sales tax in Counterpoint and letting the integration do that for us. Also, it makes a couple of touchscreen and data dictionary changes that need to be made as well for this to function. Like I said, some security codes are changed. A tax authority and a tax code are set up for Avalara transactions, and then a couple of other store settings are changed as well. And then the customer will take care of configuring the tax category and the tax exempt information on customers. So within the Counterpoint item record, you can see circled there in red that the tax category on the item, we fill that in with the tax code from Avalara. And so Avalara has a list of literally thousands of tax codes. And so you look at your item and you say, okay, this item should be this tax code in Avalara. And so we put that in every item, and then that tax code is sent with the item information to Avalara. And that's how they can look at that item and say, well, in Texas, it's one tax, in North Carolina, it's one tax, in Florida, it's another tax. And so this is a really important piece of getting the tax calculations right. And then for our customers, our tax exempt customers, like I said, we put our tax exempt number in the customer record. And then as we are doing transactions, that tax exempt number is sent to Avalara. If you're using a tax exempt management piece of Avalara, it takes and matches that up to the exemption certificates you have on file to determine the exempt status of the customer and make sure that their records are up to date. If you're not using that piece of Avalara, it sends the tax exempt number to Avalara and exempts the sale, but the assumption then is made that you as the merchant have all of the right tax certificates on file for your customer, and that becomes your burden of proof at that point. So throughout the sales transaction, as I said, when you're entering a customer and you're entering an item into Counterpoint, every time we make a change within the sales transaction, it's calling out to Avalara. And so if you add an item, it's calling out and bringing back the tax for that item. If you change the customer, it's going to check and see if that customer is changed to being exempt. If you're entering ship to information, it's looking at that address of where you're shipping, and it's updating the information based on that ship to address. So there's many, many calls to Avalara during the transaction. And then when we finalize our transaction by going to payment, one final call is made out. All of the pieces are looked at again to make sure that we're charging the right rate, and that is the rate that's charged on the transaction. At that point, we're updating the transaction with the Avalara sales tax. Also, we changed the tax code to a tax code called AVAL, So that shows that that's where the tax came from. And then, you know, we have tracking that in Counterpoint in our tax codes showing the Avalara sales tax versus any potential other taxes that we could be booking. I've got ahead of myself here a minute, but anyway, it's doing all of this as we're going through the transaction. We support sales transactions, return transactions, validated return transactions, orders, and layaways. If we're doing an order or a layaway, the calls are still made to Avalara to calculate the sales tax, and it's bringing that back into the order or layaway for reference and for calculation of the total of those transactions. But that tax isn't booked in Counterpoint, or it isn't committed, which is sort of booked in Avalara, until we actually release that order or layaway into the final sale. And at that point, that's when it's booked in Counterpoint, and that's also when it's booked in Avalara as being final. And then also we have, as part of the integration, detailed logging of every transaction and tax calculation. So if you ever were to want to look in the background and see how a particular tax was calculated, and sometimes this happens in the beginning because you're not used to maybe knowing all of the details about how sales tax is charged, you can look at all the details and it will show you the address that it's using, it will show you the item, it will show you the state tax, the county tax, the locality tax, and all of the breakdowns, so you can see exactly how that tax is calculated. And we have all of that logging that stays in Counterpoint, and then you can also go in Avalara and see logging for that as well. So lots of detail and lots of research information if you're interested in that. And in a nutshell, that's how it works. So if you're interested in getting more information on that, you can contact your account manager and they will get with whoever needs to give you the information.
Thank you, everyone. That was crazy. I knew that sales tax was a little crazy, but I didn't know how crazy. So I appreciate that. It's pretty intense, it sounds like. We do have a few questions that came through. Jojo is wondering if we are updating the item records in the live database using Avalara tax codes, what happens when you don't have internet and have to use offline? How does the item tax code marry up to the authorities so we still collect tax offline?
Well, in the event that you go offline, you still have to have sales tax set up in Counterpoint. So like, for example, for offline ticket entry, we state we don't support it in offline ticket entry. But in the event that you lose internet connectivity in online activities, then it just rolls back and it uses the Counterpoint sales tax at that point.
Okay, that answered the question. Let me know if it didn't. And then also, how does the system handle validated returns, either in the same state, city, or across state?
So validated return, it's looking at the ship. I might have to confirm this, but anyway, it's either looking at the ship to that was in the original validated return, or you are at re-entering the ship to. I think it's pulling the ship to in. So it again is looking at the ship to information for the tax calculation rather than using the store physical location to figure the tax. So, in theory, let's say you had a tax change between the time you did the original sale and the validated return. In theory, you could have different tax rates if there was some change made. But again, it's looking at whatever that ship to is.
Wow, complex for sure.
Yeah.
Does having the Avalara integration slow down the transaction at all, or is it instantaneous?
No, it's instantaneous.
Yeah, sub-second.
And what if they're already using Avalara with their e-commerce orders?
Yeah, so e-commerce orders, the reporting the reporting for all of the e-commerce, let's say you're using Shopify or whatever. So you're going to go to Shopify and you're going to get all your sales tax reporting for e-commerce orders from Shopify. And so in Shopify, they should also have all of the Avalara backup and everything that goes with those transactions. Then when they come into Counterpoint, we're not recalculating tax or anything in Counterpoint. It's just bringing in the tax that was charged in e-commerce.
Okay. Here's an interesting scenario. If an order is entered in offline mode but processed in online mode, will it use Avalara to calculate the taxes?
No. No, because offline sales, everything's already been calculated.
No.
And so those are completed transactions that are coming into Counterpoint. So there wouldn't be another tax calculation.
All right, and there was one question about how tax is calculated on orders, but I think Karen kind of covered that with the log. You can see exactly how it's all calculated. And
right, and on orders, it goes out to Avalara just like it was going to be a sale. So it's still looking at all of those pieces to determine the right sales tax, to tell how much the customer how much they're going to be charged for the tax for that order. So you can give them the final total. But then the tax isn't booked until you release that order into a sale. And so at that point, it commits in Avalara and it becomes a sale in Counterpoint. So if you have an order and it might have 4 releases against it, each time it's released, it's only releasing the portion of the sales tax that goes with the piece that's being turned into a sale.